I had always been a quiet person, a bit of a loner. It wasn't that I didn't want to connect with people, but after a few heart-wrenching losses in my life, I had built walls around myself, convinced that no one could truly understand me. That all changed the day my new neighbor moved in next door. Her name was Mrs. Eleanor Parker. At first, she seemed like just another older woman who had come to retire in our quiet suburban neighborhood. But there was something about her presence that was different. She had a warmth, a kindness, and an energy that felt alive in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I noticed her one evening as I sat in my living room, staring out the window, nursing my old habits of isolation. Mrs. Parker was sitting on her porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset. She was alone, but somehow her solitude didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I couldn't help but wonder how someone could carry such an air of contentment. Over the next few days, I saw her more often. She'd greet me with a smile whenever I came outside, and I found myself responding with a hesitant wave. I didn't want to engage. I wasn't ready to open up to anyone, but Mrs. Parker wasn't the kind of person who would give up on a smile or a friendly gesture. One afternoon, after weeks of silent exchanges, she knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me urged me to do it. She stood there, holding a basket of freshly baked cookies, a warm smile on her face. "I thought you might like a treat," she said. "I'm Eleanor, your new neighbor." I invited her in, reluctantly at first. What started as a simple exchange turned into a conversation that stretched for hours. She didn't push me to talk about my past, but she shared stories of her own life, her late husband, her children who had moved away, her travels, and most of all, her joy in living life to the fullest, despite the struggles she had faced. It was the first time in years I had felt someone truly listening to me, not as a pity case, but as an equal. We began to spend more time together. She would invite me over for tea, and we'd sit for hours talking about everything and nothing. Her wisdom was like a light shining through the darkness I had surrounded myself in. Slowly, I began to open up, sharing fragments of my own heart, the grief, the regret, the fear of truly living again. She never judged. She simply listened, always offering gentle encouragement, never asking for anything in return. But then one day I went to her house and found the door ajar. It was strange. She had always been so careful. Inside, the house was empty. No sign of Mrs. Parker. Her personal belongings were gone, the furniture covered in dust, and there was a note on the table. With trembling hands, I read the letter. It was from her children, explaining that Eleanor had passed away quietly in her sleep 2 nights ago. She had been battling cancer for months, but she hadn't wanted to burden anyone with the news. The letter thanked me for being her friend in her last days, and I felt a rush of emotions I didn't know how to process. I went outside to her porch, where I had first seen her. As I sat there, the sun dipping below the horizon just as it had on the day we met, I realized something I hadn't expected. Mrs. Parker hadn't just been a neighbor. She had been the light I didn't know I needed. She had changed me, not with grand gestures, but with her simple, quiet presence. I was no longer the person I had been. Her kindness had opened my heart in ways I hadn't thought possible. I had learned that life, though filled with sorrow, could still be rich with meaning and connection. I wasn't alone anymore, not truly. As I sat there, I heard a soft rustling of wind, as if she were still sitting beside me, watching over me. The lesson she left me with was simple. Sometimes it's not the grand moments, but the quiet, gentle ones that change our lives forever. And in her memory, I vowed to never shut myself off from the world again. Because we all need a little light, and sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. To anyone out there struggling with isolation, remember, connection doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the form of a smile, a cup of tea, or a kind word when you least expect it. Don't shut yourself off from it. You never know how much you need it until it's too late.